So let us, before we go into the main part today, I'm appointed somehow for introducing about Mujang Ma, what the Mujang Ma is, and so just give me 2-3 minutes to brief about the concept of this event. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for all who are attending this Mujang Ma. Mujang Ma is actually the place. Well, if those who know Arabic, Mujang Ma is of course the place that we gather, and that's why we call this event Mujang Ma, to any of the people who are interested in the matter in any affairs in Syria, welcome. And any of the participants, our aim is any of the participants who are involved in Syrian issues or affairs, who expect them to get the hints or clues for their own activities. And of course, we encourage the participants to interact and also share your experience as well during the session. So next, please. So, well, as we are dealing with the things happen in Syria, whether regardless it's in the past or current situation, we try to apply the Chatham House rules. So anybody who participates in this event can share the information you received during the session, but not identify who speaks and who raised the questions and answered. So this is basically following the Chatham House rules. And if you have any questions or clarifications, please use the button, the hands raising up, and you can speak. Or you can also comment in the chat box during the session. And we are actually recording this event, and the key speech will be published later on. Minutes of this event, free discussion part, will be also published with speaker's name anonymously. And next, please. So for future, we expect, of course, the Syrian partners of NGOs or private sectors, and more people to involve and interact with us to have more broader perspective of what's going on in Syria or around the world. And if you have any recommendation and suggestion for the key speakers from any other aspects, then it's also welcomed to receive. So this is the last slide, I believe, Futsuki-san. And I think lastly now, Mr. Futsuki shared the forms for the survey after the session. So please feel free also to open and give us the feedback. How did you find the event, and just to improve our future activities. Thank you very much again, and I will return the microphone back to Mr. Futsuki-san, or I can already give the microphone to Ino-san.
と申します。お顔を見知りの方もそうでない方もご参加ありがとうございます。Thank you for joining in the meeting, and today we are welcoming Mr. Shadi Balaji. He is the international coordinator of NGO ATHLOS. The ATHLOS is supporting the disabled refugees through power of sport. And first, I will introduce the Shadi-san briefly and the ATHLOS activities as well. But the audience, almost all audience, I think, can understand Japanese, so let me explain in Japanese. And Shadi-san, don't worry, I explain very correctly, okay? シャーディバラジさん、今日のスピーカーなんですけれども、アメリカにもう40年住まれているシリアご出身の方で、彼のストーリーというのはとてもユニークなんですけれども、シリアで空手を習ったところから、彼の人生がすごく大きく動き出したんですけども、アメリカに渡った後も空手の先生なんか指導もされていて、で、その関係で、シリアの、戦争が始まった後にですね、空手の仲間たちが、トップアスリートであったとしても、こう、避難して、もうスポーツをする機会だったり、そういうものが奪われてしまうっていう中で、空手の仲間たちを、サポートしようということの活動から、様々な難民のアスリートに出会い、で、その中でですね、難民選手団、皆さんご存知かと思うんですけれども、そこに出場していたパラの、イブラヒム・フセイン選手と出会ってですね、それが、大きく彼の、心にインパクトを与えまして、今、そのアスロスという、障害のある難民をスポーツで支援する団体の、コーディネーターをされています。で、アスロスはそのイブラヒム・フセイン選手と、その方もシリア出身なんですけども、一緒に作った団体で、で、今日は、シャーディさんに、その、ユニークな、シリアと空手ってなかなかこう、一見結びつかないんですけども、実はすごくつながりが深くて、シリアは空手の強豪国なんですが、そのお話だったりですね、あとなぜその、スポーツを通して難民の力になる活動をしようと思ったかとかですね、あとは、アメリカに40年住んでらっしゃるので、その視点から、例えば9.11も、ご存知でしょうし、イラク戦争の動きもご存知でしょうし、そういう視点もちょっとシェアしていただけたらなというふうに思っています。Shaji-san, I explained about your life story briefly. So you met the karate and it's a unique, your life story is very unique and why you decided to support disabled refugees through sports because of the karate or because of the sport network. And then maybe we are so interested in your perspective as a Syrian living in the United States. Maybe you witnessed the September 11 or Iraqi war from the United States. And maybe please tell us so how the support for refugees in the United States, how is the reaction of people toward the support for refugees as well? And maybe your future goals through ATHLOS activities. So first, let me explain about ATHLOS briefly to the audience, okay? Then I will pass microphone to you. それでそのATHLOSの活動、こうでも、ですけども、スポーツで気を解けるっていうようなことを目指して、障害のある難民の方にスポーツの機会をというふうにやります。で、この写真が、イブラヒム・フセイン選手という、内戦の時に、友人を救おうと、して砲撃にご自身も右足を失って、もともと、競泳選手だったんですけれども、なんかこう、治療が受けられない中、地中海を渡って治療を受けて、再び泳ぎたいという思いを胸に抱いて、それだけをもう、握りしめて地中海渡ってギリシャに行き、途中、言葉もわからないし、お金も全くない中で、公園で草木を食べたこともあったというふうに彼は言っていましたけれども、そこからもう本当にちょっとずつトイレ掃除したりですね、カフェテリアで働いたりして、少しずつ自立をしていきながら水泳の道に戻り、で、ギリシャの大会で、優勝するまでになったことによって、史上初結成されたリオの難民選手団に選ばれた選手です。で、自分はそうやって、世界のトップに立ったんだけども、多くの障害を抱えた難民の人たちには支援の手もほとんど届いていないということで、自分がそうやって活躍することで希望を届けることと、注目、関心を持ってもらうっていうことを活動内容にしていまして、今は車椅子バスケの難民のチームを作って、それで大会に出られる。で、やって、障害のある難民の声を解けていこうというような活動をしている感じです。で、それは、その団っていうのは先ほど言ったように、障害のある難民の方に 支援をということと、害を増やすということと、難民の死が助け合ったり、難民が難民の目になれるというようなことも目指しています。この中のシャーディさんは国際コーディネーターをしていて、私はちょっと日本チームでお伝いしているという感じですけれども、まもなく、難民の日、来月ありますけども、そこに向けてシャーディさんとイブラヒムさん、来日しようとしています。で、それは、去年の東京パラリンピックで、来たんですけれども、その時はコロナで十分に交流ができなかったので、今回は直に、お話をできる機会をということで、来日ツアーを進めています。シャーディさんには、ご自身の、人生も含め、そのアスロスの活動も含め、今日たくさん話していただこうと思っています。すいません、長くなりましたが、事前の説明はこれらにします。Okay, Shadi san, thank you for your waiting. So, please start your story. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Konnichiwa. First of all, I want to thank you for your interest in our new organization, and I'm humbled by your interest in my own story. I heard from Mariko-san that there's interest in ATHLOS, but there's also a little bit of interest on the story of Sensei Okamoto and his journey in the Middle East, starting in Syria, and a little bit of interest in my life story and being an immigrant from Syria and coming to the United States and doing my professional life and my karate life, and then how it eventually evolved into being involved in charity. So I will try to give a lecture that touches all these topics, but of course the main topic will be about ATHLOS. I am 68 years old. I am retired, and I have been in the United States for 43 years. So pretty much this is home for me, but I grew up in Syria for the first 22 years of my life. And of course, I go back and forth, and I still have family there and friends there. I will start by talking how this journey of mine started. The more I thought about it in the past, and when I talked to friends and they asked me the same question, I go back always to my father and to my mother. My mother, for her time, was college educated at a time where girls did not even go to school, or maybe went to school for 3 or 4 years just to learn how to read and write. But my mother got an education from college to be a teacher, and she specialized in teaching the blind. And I remember my childhood, her school schedule is slightly different than mine. So when I finish school, I run to her school, and then the last 2 hours I'll play with the blind kids, and I spend time with them, and I sit in the classroom. And in Syria at that time, we're talking in the 60s, the blind kids came from mostly farming areas, and they were really abused, and they didn't know how to do anything. And my mom spent so much time teaching them how to eat, teaching them how to speak, educating them, cooking food for them, and taking them all the way to graduate even with PhDs, doctorate degrees from the university. So this is something that I grew around with my mother. And of course, it's an incredible reference point. My father graduated from the police academy in 1948 as an officer, lieutenant, and served all around the country. But eventually, he ended up being the warden of prisons and the deputy chief of police. And when he was in prison, that's when he really put his incredible mark. He spent 5.5 years running the prison system. And during those 5 years, of course, again, I was a child. I was spending a lot of time at the prison. My father let me play with the prisoners without any guards. I was 6 and 7 and 8 years old, running around playing basketball, surrounded by prisoners all the time. And my father was in office, and there were no guards. He concentrated on making the prison a correction institute. And he believed that the way it can be done is by teaching the prisoners a job and making them earn income so they can support their families, by introducing education all the way to college education by introducing sports. So he had all kinds of sports in the prison. Actually, in the year 1962 or 63, he had 264 sporting events in 1 year alone. And the prison competed in the league, the national league, and they won 3rd place in volleyball in Syria. And he also introduced art. And he believed that by enhancing the people's character with art and education and sports, people can change to be a productive citizen. So again, that's another reference point for me, where they were a father and a mother that dedicated their life to doing good and doing charity. And we grew around that as the normal way of living. And for us, this is the way to continue our lives. My youngest sister became a director in the United Nations in Syria, and she was in charge of 2 million Iraqi refugees for many years. And then she migrated to the United States, and now she's a consultant with the United Nations, and she goes down to Jordan and to Iraq, and she just came back from Poland because of Ukraine, and she helps people. Here she is in the picture with Angelina Jolie, with the Iraqi refugees, and she helps giving consultation on how to run refugee camps and how to prepare for them and what to do with the people. So she had the same reference point that I had, and she ended up dedicating her life to charity. My other 2 sisters, one of them lives in the United States and one of them lives in Syria. They collect money from comfortable people with money, and then they support poor families in Syria, orphans and poor families. So they're always going around and helping people who are needy right now because of the situation. So this gives you an idea, because people ask me, why are you spending all this time with charity, and what's the reason for that? So it made me think, why is this something part of the way I want to live? And this is maybe a good explanation for why that happened. So now we go back a little bit to, I'll introduce the concept of karate coming into Syria. So the Japan Karate Association, Nihon Karate Kyokai, was an organization that was becoming a world strong organization in Japan in the 50s and early 60s. And when they graduated instructors, they collaborated with countries by sending those instructors to those countries to introduce karate. And karate was very new at that time and very interesting. So for example, they send Sensei Inoida to England, Sensei Kase to France, Sensei Shirai to Italy, Sensei Ochi to Germany, Sensei Nishiyama and Okazaki to the United States. Of course, they sent Sensei Hideki Okamoto and Norimasa Oshimura to teach karate in Syria and in Lebanon, since Beirut and Damascus were only 1 hour drive away. And they sent Sensei Kawai to teach judo. So this is my Sensei Hakmat, who was Sensei Okamoto's star student and many times Middle East champion. He himself also studied in Japan for 1 year and speaks fluent Japanese. Right now, he's world champion in shooting, which is very interesting too. Unfortunately, in Syria, because we have a kind of a military type government, we ended up with Sensei Okamoto teaching only in the police academy. So he came in the late 60s and teaching in the police academy, but then within 2 years, some of his students started teaching outside in the clubs in Damascus. And that's how I got introduced into karate. I started taking karate and judo in a club near my house. And Sensei Hakmat was my sensei. And I loved both sports very much. So I started training 6 days a week. And I was addicted and trained all the time at home, and at night, in the daytime. And I did well in competition, so I got taken into the national team, and I became a member of the national team in Syria. And when I became a member, then I started also training with Sensei Okamoto and Sensei Oshimura. Not regularly, but whenever we are preparing for tournament. But Sensei Okamoto started visiting our dojo also and teaching sometimes. And I used to run and sneak into the police academy, jump over the fence so I can train with Sensei Okamoto. So my karate journey in Syria was in 1971 to 1976. In 1976, I won the Middle East Championship. And in 77, I left Syria to England. Sensei Okamoto himself started teaching in Syria 4 days a week. And then he takes his car and drives after the 4th day and goes to Beirut. And then he teaches 3 days in Beirut. And then he drives back to Damascus and teaches 4 days. In Damascus, he had Sensei Oshimura assisting him. And in Beirut, he had Sensei Nakayama assisting him. So karate grew very strong in Syria and Lebanon at that time, and became one of the most popular things in the country. And then I think in 1975, Sensei Okamoto had a little bit of a conflict with the Syrian government because they were always putting restrictions on him. He wants to grow karate to a very high level, but they did not agree with him, so he left Syria to Egypt. And he started teaching in Egypt. Sensei Shigehiro Okamoto stayed in Syria for 1 more year after that, and he was our coach, national team coach, instructor for that time. So Sensei Okamoto went to Egypt and started teaching in Egypt, and we can see the result of that now. Egypt is the strongest country of karate in the world right now. So every world championship, Egypt takes 2 or 3 gold medals, 2 or 3 silver, 2 or 3 bronze. And they dominate karate incredibly. So his work was amazing in Egypt. Unfortunately, he passed away of cancer. And I remember when I was coming back from Japan in 2006, I was coach for the US team. I received a call from Sensei Okamoto in the airport, and he said, I heard that you were coaching in the US team in Japan. I am so proud of you. I am so glad this is how you become. And he congratulated me, and it was one of the highlights of my life. A couple of years later, unfortunately, he died from cancer. So that's the story of karate in Syria and in the Middle East and how it became. So then I will go to continuing where I went from there. I went from Syria to England. I trained with Sensei Inoida in England. I competed in England, and I was on his fighting team, and we won the England championship. And until then, I really had dedicated myself to karate, and I did not go to college. So I was thinking that karate is going to be the rest of my life. This is a picture of our team that won the United States Championship, and I was the team captain, I think in 1990, if I'm not mistaken. And so then I started working in the Middle East, in Sharjah, in the Emirates, and I realized that I need to have an education. So I went to the United States in 1978 and joined the university there. I studied at Rice University. I got a degree in mechanical engineering, and I started a dojo in Houston. So when I graduated, I was working in the daytime from morning until 5. Then I was teaching from 6 until 9:30 at night in my dojo. And the dojo grew. We had over 200 students, and we did maybe 26 international seminars in my dojo, always bringing one of the top Japanese instructors in the world and doing a 3-day practice seminars. So the dojo was very successful, very Japanese, very traditional. And I competed. I became a member of the US national team, and I became a coach for the US team in Japan in World Championship and in Greece in World Championship. When I was teaching in the United States, I started giving seminars in Carolina, in Miami, Florida, in Dakotas. And when I taught seminars, I always felt funny about taking money. I felt that my education of karate should go and be given to people for free. So I think that's a take on my wanting to do charity. So I never charged for seminars. And then in my dojo with 200 students, maybe there were about 30, maybe 40 poor students. They don't have money. And when I located who the poor people are, I told them not to pay anymore. and they were never charged for karate. They were never charged for karate gi uniform. They were never charged for attending seminars. They were never charged for taking belt tests and for certification. And I started teaching in Latin America. I went to Mexico, to Ecuador, to Nicaragua, Costa Rica, to Panama, and all the seminars I gave there for 31 years, I never charged any money. Every time they bring the money at the end of the seminar, I gave it back to the instructor and I said, please use it to make your dojo better or to help your students or something like that. And for me, it was a wonderful thing to do because I saw through the years how these instructors who are poor in poor countries growing and becoming comfortable and having 2 or 3 dojos and building a better life for their families and all these things and then become like family to me. They will become very close. The sensei in Mexico, he sends his daughter over to Houston. They stay in my house. I train them, and right now one of them is the Pan American champion. So it's wonderful to see results for doing the work that I did. And for me, karate was not really about making money. It was more about how to help young kids, how to help poor people, and how to help third world countries in Latin America. In the last 4 years, there were a lot of refugees in Europe who were karate people from Syria. And they were champions, all of them, but by being a refugee in Europe, they were not allowed to participate in competition because if it was a German championship or European championship, they were not citizens of these countries, so they cannot compete. They also did not have any certification because when they left Syria and they requested their Dan certification from Syrian Federation, they asked them for like €1,000 or 800 euro to give them certification. And they needed those certifications to work as a karate instructor. So our organization, which is called New World Karate Do Association, published a certification for all these instructors, and we send them free certification and free certificates also for their students. And then they were able to work in Europe as instructors. We have now about maybe 14 or 18 instructors, Syrian, working in Europe, and they have dojos. We have about 15 in Turkey. So about 30 total instructors with karate schools. Through the help, we give them free certification so they can work. Also, myself, I started supporting them financially by paying for their journeys to competition in Europe. And then they were allowed, using my friend Ahmad, who is living in Europe, to get them permission to compete in European championships. So this was my way of going into Europe now and being involved with the refugee situation. And this was happening close to my retirement time, so I had a little more time on my hands. And on one of my trips to Luxembourg, Ahmad introduced to me the idea that he knows Ibrahim Hussein, who's a swimmer and a professional basketball player. And he met him in Greece, and he has a unique idea to create a wheelchair basketball team for refugees so it can compete in Europe and it can represent the story of the people who were refugees but also disabled and tell their stories to the world. So I agreed with Mr. Ahmad to do an inaugural a competition for a refugee team in Leipzig, Germany, about 2.5 years ago. So I supported that event myself. I flew to Leipzig and Ibrahim came, and we brought refugees who are basketball players, and they came in and we did a training, and then we did a game with the Leipzig team. And we sat down and we discussed the matter. And during that time, I got to meet Ibrahim. And I listened to his story of how he lost his leg and damaged the other leg, and how he ran away to Turkey and all the struggle he went through, and how he got on a boat and went to Greece and lived in the streets and ate from the trees. And worked cleaning toilets, and a life that is really, really, really horrible. And then eventually he ended up playing basketball and swimming, and that changed his life completely. And then he was recognized by the International Paralympic Committee, and they allowed him to compete in the Rio Olympics in Brazil. And then he started, and he made it, of course, to the Tokyo Paralympics in Tokyo. He started talking about his idea of doing a basketball team, and what he wanted from that basketball team is to compete in Europe and in the world, and by doing so, bringing media and attention to the story of the disabled refugees, not only the athletes, but everybody else, because according to the United Nations, there are now more than 100 million displaced people and more than 14 million with disability, and that's displaced. So refugees, I think there's more than 7 million disabled refugees. And this story is so big, but there's very little attention to it. And I was really interested and I liked the idea. But then as soon as we started doing that, many other athletes started saying, what about me? I play tennis, I do fencing, I do weightlifting. Can you please help us too? So then there was the birth of the idea of ATHLOS, to create an organization that is a non-profit organization that helps disabled refugee athletes rise to the competition stage, and by doing so, tell their story and tell the stories of all the disabled refugees, and bring grants and funding and sponsorships so ATHLOS can take that help and use it to help disabled refugees, every disabled refugee. We started the organization in Greece. We registered it, but unfortunately COVID came. And when COVID came, it hurt us financially a lot because we had no budget whatsoever, zero money. And I was funding the organization myself. So we were able only to fund Ibrahim during that time. And he went to multiple competitions in swimming. And then we funded him all the way to Japan. But with the return from Japan and the attention that it brought, and we registered the organization also in the United States, we decided that now it's the time to really relaunch the organization. And luckily, in those 2 years of COVID, we learned a lot, and we learned what the real purpose should be and how to go after it. And we also gained a lot of volunteers. We gained Team Japan, ATHLOS Japan, a wonderful team of volunteers who are incredibly skilled, incredibly smart, incredibly dedicated, and helping us establish support for ATHLOS in Japan. We gained the United States, a law firm that represents us for free, and an advisor, marketing advisor that gives us advice for free, and multiple people who are our advisory board who helped me raise funds. And once we raised that fund, although it's not too much money, we started our activities. The first activity was a camp in Turkey, where we brought in 18 athletes. We trained them for 4 days, and we gave them some money to help them with their life. And we promised them that the next camp will be at least twice as big and twice as good. But this is only an introduction, and we established their membership in our organization. The second camp we did, I just came back from Greece. We brought a basketball team. We did, again, 8 practices, 4 days of training. And then we did a game, a goodwill competition game against ATHLOS, Team ATHLOS in Greece. And incredibly, we won the match. And then we did the match against Team Ike, which is the Greek champion. And we lost, but we gave them a hard time. And it was wonderful for everybody. We met with many government officials, and they expressed to us that they are interested in our cause and they want to help us. And we decided that this is not the beginning. We are going to build a very strong basketball team over the next 12 months and do at least 1, if not 2, more training camps, and prepare the team for future events where we can go and play in different countries and different places. The next thing that's happening is a trip to Japan, where myself and Ibrahim will come, and he will give lectures to high schools, and we will meet with different officials. We will meet with Sony, hopefully, and we will meet with Toyota, and we will meet with media, and try to create a grassroots following for ourselves in Japan. And luckily, we got to meet with Religion for Peace. So that's an incredible thing for us, because if they decide to help us get on their platform, that will give a lot of attention to what ATHLOS is and what it's trying to do. And maybe Religion for Peace in New York also will help us spread the word in the United States. We are building now another group of volunteers in Greece. So we have now 6 volunteers, and they're starting a social media effort. And hopefully very soon I will be heading to Germany to meet with the International Wheelchair Basketball Federation to approve the team as a refugee team to compete under an ATHLOS flag and compete in different places in the world. And we are doing a big training camp in Turkey in September, and we're hoping for a training camp in London. Those are our plans for this year. To explain what our vision is in a better way, I'd like to go 5 years from now and come backwards instead of go forward. 5 years from now, I would love to see that this effort has become a name brand like Nike, like Adidas, and it's ATHLOS. And ATHLOS is a large organization with offices all around the world and support from law firms and organizations and governments. And it concentrates 100% on taking athletes, promoting them to be super athletes, competing around the world, telling the story of the injustice that happened to them. Then all the funding that comes goes to creating education, vocational schools, factories, medical support for all disenfranchised, disabled refugees anywhere. I believe sport brings you back to life. I believe having a job gives you back your integrity. And I believe getting a little bit of medical support gets you back on your feet so you can be a productive human being. This is what I would like to see ATHLOS in 5 years. How we get there, this year is a start. Next year, hopefully we will double and we'll do more and plant the seed for our project in the minds of governments and big corporations. And the year after that, we will start executing that project. And every year we will do one model in one country and take that model and repeat it in a different country and a different country. And I believe governments, as they see what we are doing and how well it's doing and how much it's helping, they will jump on board and help us. And I believe the United States, the United Nations will do so too. And I believe a lot of corporations who help a lot of good causes also will come on board, since we have an athlete point also, and that helps with a lot of sponsorship and marketing for those companies. Then they will come on board and help us achieve our goal. So pretty much that covers what I really wanted to talk about today. And what I would like to do now is open for discussion and open for questions. And I will be happy to answer any question you have.
Thank you for sharing your great idea and great dream, and your speech is so powerful and brings us the reality or like a difficult landscape about the refugee situation. Yeah. So maybe